All right. Okay. So, assalamualaikum. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. The weekend is almost here, right? But before you go off and enjoy yourselves, right? Enjoy your weekend. Okay. Stay with me for a little bit. Okay. Stay. Let me hold your attention for just a little under 2 hours, right? One and a half hours, okay, to talk about our lecture topic here. This is psychoanalytic literary criticism, okay, uh, or right. So psychoanalytic literary criticism. So we're gonna talk about this, okay, from the title, right? From the title, from the name of this literary criticism, you can already sort of imagine, right? You can sort of guess, okay, at what this is about, right? So psychoanalysis, as you might be able to guess, okay, deals with psychology, okay, not psycho as in crazy people, yeah, but you know uh, psychology as in the theory of psychology and so on, and you apply that to the reading of literature, okay. So let's get started. So under psychoanalytic criticism, okay, which is uh, a big topic, okay, there are a few branches, okay, there are a few branches, a few theorists, okay, that looks at psychoanalysis, okay, namely um about around three figures are well known under psychoanalytic, right? That is Sigmund Freud. Okay, so Sigmund Freud is said to be the father of psychoanalysis. It's his idea. He invented it. He created psychoanalysis, right? And then the other two figures of psychoanalytic theory, okay, are both his students. Okay, you have Carl Jung, okay, and then another person is Alfred Adler. Okay, although at its core, okay, at its core, Freud's theory, Jung's theory, and Adler's theory are all more to do with psychology. Okay, for treating people and so on, right? But their theory can still be taken and applied to the reading and analysis of literature. Okay, they themselves, okay, don't really use these theory to talk about literature, except Freud. Okay, Freud does that. Okay, but he is more of a medical doctor actually. Okay. All right, so let's begin. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at today. Okay, I will give you a brief introduction to the concept of psychological literary criticism. Okay, that is, what is that all about? Okay, and so on. Okay, and then we'll look at the background of psychoanalysis. Okay, where did that come from? What is the core idea, and so on. And then we're going to talk about Sigmund Freud. Okay, what is his practice? How did he come upon this idea of psychoanalysis? All right, and then we will talk about three of his theories. Okay, three of his theories that are quite important and quite useful when we analyze literature, okay, using a psychological framework. All right, and these three theories are the unconscious mind, the interpretation of dreams, and then defense mechanism. Okay, and then for conclusion, I will wrap up by looking at how you apply these three concepts, okay, in literary criticism. All right, so you might notice when looking at this lecture here, we are more focused on Sigmund Freud. Okay, so like I said just now, there are other figures, right, in psychoanalysis. All right, but I'll save that for next week. Okay, so today's lecture, we are focusing on Sigmund Freud's theory of psychoanalysis. Next week, we will talk about Carl Jung and Northrop Frye. Okay, so that's for we'll save that for next week, right? I can't cram everything in here. Okay, so let's get started then. Okay, let's have a look now. If you have any questions, okay, if you have any questions, anything you want to add, any comments or so, any observation, right? Go ahead and chip in. Okay, you can type in the chat. Okay, I will address it. All right, or you can just unmute and talk about it, right? And ask your question. Okay, no problem at all. Okay, remember because if you simpan, okay, if you don't ask the question, okay, you might end up totally confused here, right? Okay, so introduction. First of all, let's address psychological criticism. Okay, what is psychological criticism? So as the name implies, psychological criticism uses psychological theories to analyze literature. So you take theories from psychologists, right? Theories from psychologists, and then you apply it to the reading of literature. Okay, psychoanalytic criticism is just one part of psychological criticism. Okay, it's just one part of it. All right, it's the most famous part. Okay, but it's just one part. All right, so in this case, in the case of psychoanalysis, we are using theories by Sigmund Freud. Okay, we're using the Freudian theory. But, okay, okay, if you want to use psychological criticism, you could also use theories from other psychologists. Okay, what psychologists do you know, right? What other psychologists do you know other than Freud? Maybe you remember Jean Piaget, right? The French psychologist, right? Jean Piaget from your psychology class, right? Psychology in education. Other than Piaget, siapa lagi? Erik Erikson, right? You might know Erik Erikson. All right. So you can use Erik Erikson's theory to talk about literature. Who else? Okay, Abraham Maslow, for example. Okay, Maslow's theory. You can use all of these people came up with their own psychological theory, right? Theory of psychology. Piaget and Erikson, for example, they talk about stages of development and so on, right? You can take that theory and apply it to the analysis of literature, reading of literature, okay? And that is completely legit. That is psychological criticism, all right? So in psychological criticism, we ask psychological questions, okay? We ask psychological questions to determine motivations, personality traits, and emotional responses. Okay, we ask these kinds of questions. Okay, what psychological needs does reading and writing literature fulfill? All right, when you read literature or when you write literature, okay, what sort of human mental and psychological needs does that fulfill? Okay, you remember the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where does literature fit in there? Okay, where does media, culture, language fit into that? Where does art fit into that, right? In that the triangle of needs, okay? Why do characters in the story that we react the way they do? Why do these characters make these decisions and so on? Okay, how do characters' lives and backgrounds influence their actions? So when you read your story, okay, you're trying to figure out, okay, how does the upbringing of this character, okay, the education background of this character, the experience of this character create the kind of character, the kind of personality that they have? How does it influence the decisions that they make, right? And of course, we ask, what kind of personality traits do characters have and why, right? So when you think about psychological criticism, right, it is not something new. Okay, if you have taken a literature class before, okay, in school, even, right, even in school, at primary school level, secondary school level, if your teacher asks you to read a story, and then the teacher asks you to, okay, what do you think about this character? Okay, what is the personality of this character? What is the characteristic of this character, right? So what would you write down, well, as the characteristic of this person, right? Maybe you say, oh, this person this is selfish, right? What else? This person is overconfident, you say, right? And then, I would ask you, why do you say he's overconfident, right? Or because he did this in the story. You're making that judgment, right? That whole process of judging the character and applying these labels of personality traits, that is all psychological criticism. Cuma at the school level, at the undergrad level, and so on, right? We don't overtly call it psychoanalysis. Okay, we don't overtly call it psychological criticism. We just use it, right? We just use that kind of analysis, right? So we've been doing it all along. Yeah. Cuma the way that we apply it, here and there, and so on. Okay. All right. So making judgment on character, okay, their personality and so on, right? That is part of psychological criticism. Okay. So background of psychoanalysis. So where does psychoanalysis fit in, right? Psychoanalysis is the theory proposed by Sigmund Freud. Okay, it is the theory of the unconscious mind. Okay, it is the theory of it is one of the early theories about the human mind. Okay, so psychoanalysis is the comprehensive psychological and psychotherapeutic theory and treatment method developed by Sigmund Freud in the 19th and early 20th century. It offers a deep understanding of human behavior, thoughts, emotions, and the unconscious processes. Okay. First of all, a bit of something I want to clarify here. Okay, in the late 19th and 20th century, we're talking about the 1800s here. Okay, the 1800s to the 1900s. Okay, and so on. All right, through to the modern day, right? In the early 1800s, okay, the idea of psychology doesn't really exist yet. Okay, Sigmund Freud was one of this pioneer figure in psychology, in the early psychology. Okay, he's one of the early figures. All right, Sigmund Freud himself was a medical doctor, actually. Yeah, he was a medical doctor, and he was looking into how the brain, okay, how our minds, influence things like our behavior and so on. Okay, how our experience influence our behavior. Okay. All right. So background of psychoanalysis, right? At the core of psychoanalysis is the belief in the existence of an unconscious mind that holds thoughts, memories, desire, and emotions that are not consciously accessible. Okay, we'll get to conscious and unconscious mind later. Okay, these unconscious elements can influence an individual's thought, behavior, without their awareness. So the process of psychoanalysis is to delve into the subconscious motivations, desire, and psychological conflicts of a character. Okay, and authors, okay, exploring how these aspects influence the themes, the symbols, and the narrative structure of literary works. Okay, so what you do in psychoanalytic criticism, okay, is you look for these subconscious motivations that might be influencing the characters in the story and so on, right? Okay. But then we also say that the story as a whole can be, can be indicative of what the author himself is experiencing. Okay, so in the story you find meaning of the author himself. Okay, meaning or insight into the author himself. Okay, now let's look at Sigmund Freud. Okay, a bit of background here. He was known as the father of psychoanalysis. Okay, so it's his theory. He invented it, right? He was an Austrian neurologist and psychologist who made significant contribution to the understanding of human behaviors, personality, and mental processes. Freud's work on the unconscious mind, dreams, and psychoanalysis emerged as he integrated his scientific background with clinical observation and experiences in the field of psychology. Okay, so like I said before, in the late 1800s, okay, psychology was very very new. Okay, what they understood was what they're trying to understand is the difference between the brain, okay, about to say what's right, Brian, yeah, okay, brain, okay, versus the mind, okay. What is the difference between the brain and the mind? Does anyone know? What is the difference between the brain and the mind? Okay, so in the late 1800s, okay, in these early days of psychology, right, they are trying to figure this out. Okay, so the brain, what is the brain? The brain is this pink, squishy thing you have in your head. Okay, and it's kind of important for for your body, right? Yes, yes, I did. Okay, the brain is the organ. Okay, the brain is the organ, right? Is an organ in that is inside your skull. Okay, so medical doctors and so on, okay, can operate the brain and things like that, right? But they are trying to figure out. So the field of psychology is trying to figure out how does this brain function. Okay, how the thoughts. Okay, your thoughts, your things that goes on inside the brain. And we're not talking about blood, we're not talking about neurons and so on. We're talking about what the things that you think about, right? So the mind is more of the thoughts, okay, that goes inside your head. Okay, so to simplify this explanation, right? Let's compare, say, for example, the brain and the mind in terms of computer, right? In terms of you know a computer, you're staring at one right now, right? Okay, the brain is the hardware, right? The brain is the hardware in your computer. Okay, so the brain is the CPU that you have, your motherboard again, your hard disk. Okay, nobody use hard disk anymore, right? SSD now, right? So your SSD, your storage, right? It is your your CPU, everything, your graphics card, right? Okay, that's your brain. Okay, so all of that, the brain is the hardware. Okay, it is the hardware. All right, you can use but you can use a screwdriver and take out the parts, right? Yes, that's right. That's right, Joy. Okay, the mind is the software. Okay, the mind is the software. Okay, the mind is your Windows installation, your OS. The mind is your Microsoft Words. Okay, the mind is your all your Steam video games and so on. Okay, so The mind is the software, all right? So if we're dealing with parts of that are hardware, okay, parts like CPU, the motherboard, and so on, you can take a screwdriver, you can open up your computer, and you can take it out, right? You can take out the graphics card and so on, right? You can take out, you can service your computer using a screwdriver and so on again, okay? That is hardware, all right? But what about software? You cannot use a screwdriver to fix an error, in your Windows, right? You cannot if your computer gets a virus, okay? If there's a virus in your OS, right? In your computer, if there's a virus in your computer, how do you fix it? You can't just take a screwdriver and take out things, right? It doesn't work like that, right? You have to, what do you have to do? You have to turn on the computer, you have to access the computer, right? And then you have to run your antivirus program or something, right? You have to turn it on, basically. You have to access it like that, right? So the field of psychology is about that, okay? So the field of psychology is trying to access mind, okay? Why is this important? Why is this important? Yeah, because when things go wrong, when people go crazy, for example, you cannot fix it by cutting up the brain and then digging around the brain using a screwdriver. It doesn't work like that, right? Okay. I tell you, in the 1700s, in the 1800s, Victorian era, right? How do they fix people that go crazy? Okay, people that have mental illnesses. Back then, they didn't call it mental illness. Yeah, they call it what? Hysteria. All right, they call it hysteria. Okay, how do you fix people that have hysteria back then? Okay, before psychology, you strap them to an electrodes, right, and you give them electroshock therapy. Okay, you give electroshock therapy, or maybe they'll restart their brain, right? Turn it off and turn it on again, right? Okay, maybe they'll fix the problem. Okay, so it's either you get electroshock therapy to cure you from crazy, okay, or you bring them to church because you think that they're possessed by the devil, okay, or the one of the final solution is called lobotomy. Okay, lobotomy, what they do is, you have a part of your brain back here, right? They paku kan kat situ. Okay, what is that for? Okay, it's to stop you from harming yourself or harming other people. Okay, because sometimes people go crazy, they become dangerous, right? So lobotomy, pop, you become like a vegetable, basically. And so that's to stop you from attacking other people. All right, so there's no effort to access the mind, okay, until psychology came into the picture. All right, so when psychoanalysis comes in, okay, it introduced something called the talking cure. Okay, the talking cure. So what do you do in the talking cure? Okay, this is apparently how you address issues of hysteria. Okay, let me ask you all this, right? In your mind, in your imagination, okay, if you go to a psychiatrist, right? If you go to a psychiatrist for treatment, for therapy, what do you do? What do you have to do? What does a psychiatrist tell you to do? You have to talk, right? You have to talk. Okay, the image, the most common mental image, right, of this therapy with a psychologist is that you have like a sofa or something, right? So you as the patient, you lie down here, okay, on the sofa, right, and then you start talking, right? You start talking. What does the psychologist do? What does the psychiatrist do? They sit over here. Okay, they listen to you talk. Remember, they have to sit cross-legged, right? They sit cross-legged like that, right? They listen to you talk and they jot down notes, right? Good. They sit here, they jot down notes, they judge you for all the things you say, and then And then what happens after that? Okay, they charge you like $200 per hour, right? For for this, kan? Okay, so that was the talking cure. Yeah, that was psychotherapy. Okay, that was psychoanalysis therapy. So Sigmund Freud, what he would do is he would bring in these people that have mental issues, disturbances, or whatsoever. He would ask them to talk, right? And he would try to reach the true origin, the true cause of the issue, right? And hysteria is from our understanding today, right? Hysteria means you're possessed by you're gonna sampuk or something, right? Okay, that is hysteria. So you stay late, you stay up late, right? You stay up late in UPTM to do your drama practice, kan? And then and then tingkat 5 tu you see pocong or something, right? Okay, you see someone walking around not touching the floor, right? And then kena hysteria, right? Okay, that's our modern understanding of hysteria. But in the 1800s, hysteria basically means mental illness. Okay, mental illness, you go crazy or something, right? Okay, mental issues, mental illness. Okay, mental illness. All right, so that's hysteria back then. Okay, all right. So how do you cure hysteria according to Sigmund Freud? Okay, you have to talk. You use the talking cure. Okay, you sit down, you talk with a psychologist. Okay, and then they try to help you to address the underlying issue, right? Okay, now let's get into his theories. Okay, so like I said just now, we're going to talk about 3 of his theories. So the first one here is the unconscious mind. Okay, so the unconscious mind is at the center of psychoanalysis. Okay, you cannot have psychoanalysis without the unconscious mind, without understanding this, the theory of unconscious mind. Okay, so what is this unconscious mind? So Sigmund Freud would tell you that the mind is like an iceberg. Okay, so the mind is like an iceberg. You know what an iceberg is, right? It's one of these frozen ice out in the Antarctic, right? If you remember Titanic, right? Titanic ran into one of these icebergs, right? So what is the iceberg, right? An iceberg, what you see on top, floating on top, right? Okay, that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? The larger part of the iceberg is under the water, right? It's under the water. There's a bigger part of the iceberg that is under the water, right? So the theory of the unconscious mind, what Freud is saying here is what you can see, okay, that is the conscious mind. Okay, what you can think about is the conscious mind. The conscious mind is only a small part of your brain, actually, of your mind. Okay, what you have underneath that, hidden away, inaccessible to you, is the unconscious mind. Okay, so he splits this into 3 parts. Okay, the conscious, the pre-conscious, and unconscious. Okay, so what are these 3 things? What are these 3 parts of the brain? All right, these 3 parts of the mind. Yeah, calling it part of the brain is wrong. So these 3 parts of the mind. So the conscious, okay, is the small amount of mental activity that we know about. Okay, it refers to the thoughts, your perceptions, and so on. Okay, if for example, what goes through your brain right now, right? You are listening to me giving this lecture, right? And what goes into your brain is, what you're thinking about in your brain is like, bosannya lecture ni, kan? Oh no, I would rather be at T Life or something, kan? I would rather be somewhere else right now in this late afternoon. Oh, let me just bosan lah. Okay, let me just quickly flip through Instagram for a moment, right? See what's on. Okay, let's tengok Netflix dah pasang right? These are things that go through your mind, right? And your perception as well. Oof, bosannya kelas ni, right? Okay, that's all. All of that is the conscious mind. Okay, it is what goes through your mind. It is what you can think about. It is what you know you are thinking about, right? It's what you know that what you're thinking about. Okay, so that is the conscious mind. Underneath the conscious mind, you have the pre-conscious. Okay, these are things that you can be aware of, but it takes some effort to think about this, to be aware of these things, right? The pre-conscious refer to your memories and your stored knowledge. Okay, so for example, you are relaxing right after lunch, and just now right after you finish eating your lunch, you're relaxed, right? You say, what a great day, right? The weekend is finally here. But then suddenly you remember, right? You say, do I have anything else to do today in this Friday afternoon? And then baru you remember, Allah, apa? Sir Arif has a replacement class in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, right? It's not there in your mind all the time, right? It is a memory. Then you have to think properly. You have to try to recall that memory, right? So that is the pre-conscious mind. Okay, it is the memory. It is the stored knowledge as well. Okay, stored knowledge meaning the things that you have learned in the past. Okay, so for example, when I mentioned, earlier, I asked you what other psychologists do you know, right? So you're thinking, what was his name? Right, okay, and I mentioned Piaget, right? I mentioned Jean Piaget, and you think, oh, right, Piaget, that guy who made the car, right? No, he didn't make the car, right? Jean Piaget, he developed this theory of cognitive development. Okay, the stages a child grow up in, right? Okay, the stages of growing up, right? Okay, oh, that's the guy. Okay, I remember that, although it was like 2 years ago, right? Stored knowledge, right? Jean Piaget talked about stored knowledge, right? He has a theory about all the stored knowledge you have in your head, right? What is it called? It's called the schema, right? It's called the schema. So I baca dulu before before I start this lesson, right? Schema is the mental framework that you build in your head, right? Through all your knowledge and experience, right? You build this in your head, right? The schema, this mental framework, right? What is that? What is the schema? It is this stored knowledge, right? Okay, so all of that is pre-conscious. Okay, so pre-conscious is here. Okay, pre-conscious is just below the water. Okay, that's the pre-conscious. All right, if the conscious mind is right above the water, right, it is what you're aware of. Pre-conscious mind lies just beneath the water. Okay, it is, you can access it, but it takes some effort. Okay, it takes some effort. Now, when we talk about the iceberg, there is also parts that you cannot access, part that you are unaware of, and this is called the unconscious. Okay, things that we are unaware of and cannot become aware of. You cannot you can think hard, but you cannot reach it. Okay, what are these things? Okay, it is your unconscious fears. It is your unacceptable desires, your violent motives, right? Your irrational wishes, immoral urges, your selfish needs, your shameful experiences, traumatic memories, right? That you have tried to forget, that you've forgotten. Okay, all of these lie at the unconscious part of your mind. Okay, you cannot access them, you cannot reach down to them. Okay, but they are still there, and according to Freud, they will influence your behaviors, your actions, your reactions to things. Yeah. Okay. Any questions before we move on to this? Any questions about the unconscious first of all? Yes, okay. Okay. All right. All right. Did I miss anything? Okay. All right. So now let's talk about the Freud's theory of the personality, or also known as the tripartite mind. Okay, tripartite mind, or another the phrase the triad mind, means the same thing. Okay, it is Freud's theory about personality. Okay, the mind, he says, your personality, okay, uh, exists in three parts. Okay, there are three parts to your self. Okay, you have the id, the ego, and the super ego. Okay, and the three parts of the mind, okay, influence what you do, and so on. All right. So we have the id. The id is our primal and instinct driven part. Okay, what the id wants is instant pleasure. It wants gratification. It wants instant gratification. It wants its desires to be fulfilled. Okay, and it wants it now. Okay, so the id is driven by something called the pleasure principle. Okay, the other part of your brain is called the super ego. Okay, the super ego is our moral conscience that follows societal's rule. Okay, the super ego is also driven by something called the ideal principle. Okay, the ideal principle meaning what is most ideal. All right, and between these two, id and superego, you have the ego. Okay, the ego is basically yourself. Okay, where you are right now. Okay, the ego is driven by something called reality principle. Okay, what the ego has to do is try to compromise between the id and superego. Okay. um, Okay, so if you ever watch cartoons, right? Sometimes there is a sort of a rendition of this concept. Okay, where you have this character, the cartoon character is trying to figure out what to do, right? And then on one shoulder you have the the devil, right? Okay, on one shoulder there is the devil figure, and what's on the other shoulder? Okay, what's on the other shoulder? You have an angel figure, right?
Okay.
Right. So you have the devil and the angel, right? And the devil's telling you to do this, and the angel says, no, 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 you shouldn't do that, right? You should do this, and so on, right? Okay. So it's kind of like that. Okay. Uh, it's a little bit like that. Okay. Cuma, yeah, Tom and Jerry. Watch Tom and Jerry, selalu ada, right? It's kind of like that, although that is oversimplifying it a little bit. Okay, the id is less of a devil actually. Okay, I don't want to get the conception that the id is always bad. Okay, that's not it. I'll come back to that in a moment. All right, let's look at it a bit closer. Right, the id, ego, and superego here. So the id is the primitive and instinctual part of our brain. Okay, it operates on the pleasure principle. It is seeking immediate gratification of desires and needs. The id wants things. Okay, the id wants its desires to be fulfilled. Okay, it is hungry. It wants food now. Okay, it is bored. It wants pleasure now. Okay, and so on. Okay, so it is entirely unconscious, and it doesn't take into account reality of the external world or social norm. Okay, the id is driven by basic biological drives such as hunger, thirst, and sexual desire. It seeks pleasure and it avoids pain at all costs. Okay, it doesn't have a sense of morality or ethics, and it is often impulsive and irrational in its demands. Okay, the id operates primarily during infancy and early childhood. A child, for example, does not have a fully developed superego. Okay, so it is almost all id, right? You think about a baby, for example. If a baby is hungry, what does the baby do? The baby cries, right? Baby is hungry, the baby cries, it demands food now, right? You got to feed the baby now. Okay, you can't tell the baby, tunggu buka puasa, tunggu maghrib, kan? Right? The baby wants the food now, right? Because the baby does not have a fully developed superego yet. It only understands this primal instinct, right? This seeking, hunger and thirst, seeking to fulfill these hunger and thirst and so on. Okay, I'll talk about the superego first. Okay, what is the superego? The superego represents the internalized moral and ethical standard of society. Okay, and the individual's parents or caregivers. Okay, so the superego is basically is made up of things like your education. Okay, your upbringing. Okay, it is your belief, your faith in religion, and so on. Okay, that is your superego. Okay, it is often described as a conscience or a moral compass. Okay, it develops during early childhood, and as a result of parental influence and societal norms. All right, the superego incorporates the values, beliefs, and rules about right and wrong. Not really common sense. It's more than common sense. Okay, it's more than common sense. To say that that superego is just common sense, not really. It's the accumulated knowledge of how to behave, your role models, right? Your upbringing, as in how your parents raise you. Okay, it is in some way your cultural conditioning. Okay, a lot of these things. Okay, it is incorporated all together. Your value of what is right and wrong, your morality. That's another thing. Yeah, concept of morality, what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, your understanding of that, right? And the superego operates on the ideal principle. It strives for perfection. It adheres to moral and ethical standards. Okay, it can generate a feeling of guilt, shame, and so on when a person's behavior conflicts with moral standards. Okay, so for example, your parents always tell you to to take a bath in the morning, right, before you come to class. Okay, your parents tell you, oh, you better make sure that before you get out of the house you are clean, you're wearing fresh clothes, you have taken a bath, you brush your teeth, and so on. Okay, one day you wake up late, right? Oh no, it's time for class. You just ran out the door, right? You just wear your dirty laundry from yesterday. You rush to class, right? Feeling a bit gross out, you're feeling a bit smelly, and so on, right? What do you feel? You feel a bit shameful. You feel a bit gross out. You feel guilty. A bit alamak. The people are gonna notice, right? People on the train are gonna notice that I stink. They, oh no, okay. What a shameful behavior. Okay, I have dishonored my family. Right? All of that feeling comes from your superego. Okay, all of that feeling comes from your superego. All right, now let's talk about the ego. What is the ego? Because the ego stands in the middle. Okay, the id. Okay, your id is very demanding. It wants things right now, right? And your superego has a very high standards, right? Your superego is all of this education and so on, right? Naturally, these two are going to come into conflict, right? So what you have in the middle is the ego. the ego has to satisfy both of these things. Okay, they have to compromise between the two. Okay, the ego is part of the mind that deals with the external world and operate on the reality principle. Rafika, do you have a question to ask?
Sorry. I turn on my
Oh,
mic.
okay. Ya, kau ada soalan. Okay. All right. So, so the ego operates on the reality principle. It is in fact, you can say the ego is more of the common sense. Okay, it is what's happening now. What is where you are at right now, right? So the ego emerges as a person grows and interacts with the environment. The ego seeks to balance the demands of the id and the constraint of reality and societal norms. Okay, it helps the individual to make rational decision, and consider the consequences of their actions. Okay, the ego is partly conscious and partly unconscious. Okay, it acts as a mediator between the id and superego. Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say you are sitting at home in front of your computer. You are listening to an online lecture on a Friday afternoon. Okay, it's Friday afternoon. It's hot outside, right? You're listening to this online lecture, and the lecture is on a psychology topic. Okay, and it's a bit complicated, a bit dry, right? Your id, okay, your id in this case, all right, your id is going to tell you to just log off, right? Your id is going to tell you, come on, let's get out of here. Okay, kita dah ambil attendance tadi, kan? This is boring. Let's get out of here, right? Let's go. Let's take a nap. Okay, I'm bored. Let's play video games, right? Your id is looking for pleasure. Okay, your id is telling you, get out of here. All right, this is too boring. Okay, it wants gratification right now. Okay, so your id is telling you that. Your id is telling you, let's get out of here. Let's just log off. Okay, forget about this class, right? Your super ego will tell you, okay, mana boleh, kan? Nanti apa? Nanti if you don't learn all of this thing, kan, how are you going to pass the test? Okay, your super ego is telling you, no, you better stay in this class. You better focus, pay attention, drink your coffee, right? Pay attention. Focus on this class, right? This is good for you. It'll make you better at literature and so on. Your super ego is telling you that. Okay, your ego is trapped in the middle. Okay, your ego is trying to mediate between these two things. Okay, and usually the ego will come up with a compromise. Okay, because your ego is fighting this id. Okay, it's fighting this desire, this growing desire for gratification, for pleasure, right? And at the same time, it's trying to avoid that feeling of shame and guilt, right? If you leave Mr. Arif's class early, okay? So, but you're trying to mediate between these two. Okay, so what do? You will listen to the lecture, but at the same time, you book up Netflix, right, on one tab, right? Okay, so you've got Netflix, you play it on low volume or mute. Again, okay, you baca subtitle je. Okay, so that is a compromise. Okay, just an example, right? Okay, so you're still in the lecture, you're still kind of hearing the lecture, right? But at the same time, okay, you satisfy the its desire as well. Okay, buka Netflix, one tab, right? One tab Netflix, one tab Mr. Arif talking, right? Okay, so you satisfy the id, and at the same time you satisfy the super ego as well. Now, going back to the id just now, right? I mentioned just now that the id is primarily operates during infancy and early childhood, right? Why is this the case? Why is it that children is all driven by the id? Okay, it is because children do not have proper education yet. They they don't know how to function in. They don't have this concept of social norm, of societal norm, right? They don't have that experience, that knowledge yet. Okay, so that means a child's super ego is not yet developed properly. Okay, so all they have is their id and their ego. So the ego will always follow the id in that case, because there's no super ego controlling it, right? Okay. Um, so here, okay, let me give you an example. Okay, my son, okay, my second child, okay, he is currently 3 years old. Okay, he is learning a little bit, right? But let's take last year or the year before, right? When he's 1 years old, when he's 1 year old, or when he's age 2. Okay, uh, so at the age of 2, he is all driven by this by the id, right? And a child would want instant gratification, instant fulfillment of desire. Okay, so how does this work? When when you tell a child, for example, in my case, I tell my son, okay, tomorrow is Saturday, let's go to the park tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow morning, let's go to the park, let's ride bicycle. So my son would immediately go up, okay, and he starts, he runs to the door, okay, he wants to wear his shoes, okay. He would say, let's go to park, okay. He wants it now, all right. Dia tak faham konsep apa tunggu esok, right? Dia tak faham. He doesn't understand that delayed gratification. He doesn't understand future plans, right? If I tell him, okay, petang nanti kan, later in the afternoon we go and eat ice cream, right? No, he wants ice cream now. Okay, dia dah dengar you mention ice cream. Okay, one ice cream, he wants it now, right? So what's the solution to that? Okay, I tell me and my wife decided that, okay, whatever future plan you have, okay, you don't tell you don't tell my son, you don't mention it until it's time to do it. Okay, you know, you so you go and you ask him, you ask him, okay, do you want to go to Japan? You want to ride the aeroplane and go to Japan next year, right? Sudah, dia bangun, okay. Want to ride aeroplane? Okay, bukan dia sekarang, right? Go, right? He doesn't understand that, right? Because they are driven by instant gratification. Okay, they want it now. Okay, dia tak faham this idea that you have to wait first. We're talking about tomorrow, right? Not yet. Okay, so the id wants it now. Okay. One other thing I have to clarify. This is the id. Okay, is often seen as this the devil figure, right? It is the devil figure on your shoulder, right? And the superego is the angel. Okay. Now, I would not say that this is a fully correct interpretation. Okay, the id is not. If we look at it from a Islamic perspective, right? The id is less. It's not the devil. Okay, the id is not shaitan bisik to you. Okay, so if you imagine the id as this. The voice of shaitan telling you to log off from the online class, and that's not true. Okay, that's not it. The id is close. If we're looking at it from an Islamic perspective, the id is closer to nafsu actually. Okay, nafsu. What is nafsu? It is your desire, right? It is things that you want, right? But you can't, you tak boleh layan sangat nafsu, right? Okay, but at the same time, it is also part of being human. Okay, it is part of being human, right? It is part of us. Okay, the id, okay, is also quite important. It plays an important role. Okay, what does the id give you? Okay, what important role does it give you? Okay, it gives desire gives us, uh, desire is what gives us things like ambitions. Okay, it gives us drive, motivation. Okay, it is what makes us want things. Okay, cuma you can't have it yet. Itu saja. Alright. You think about this. Okay, you think about this. Let's say you are. I'm sure all of you. Okay, when you graduate later, when you start working later, you want to have a nice house, right? You want to have a nice house. You want to own a nice house, right? You want to live in a nice house. Okay? Yes, I'm sure everyone does this, right? Everyone has this desire, right? Where does this desire come from to own a nice house? It comes from your id. Okay? Your desire to own a house. If you do not have an id, okay? If you don't have this desire, then you will be fine, completely fine, living under a bridge, right? You live under a bridge like a homeless guy, right? Protected from the rain. Okay, cukup lah. All right. No, right? We want better things in life, right? We want to graduate, okay, and be happy, right? You want to get that scroll, right? You want your degree, okay? You want to get a good job, okay? When you graduate later, right? You want to be successful in life, right? Where does that desire come from? It comes from your id, okay? Cuma the problem is your id wants it now, okay? Your id wants it immediately. It wants it quick, okay? Your super ego is telling you, mana boleh? Okay, you can't have that big house right now. Okay, you don't have money. Check your bank account. Okay, check your bank account. Right, ada tinggal RM5 je kan. Okay, how you gonna buy that big house? Right, you can't. Okay, so your super ego is telling you you can have the big house. Okay, sorry, your ego tells you, okay, tells your id, sure, you can have the big house, but not yet. Kita kena focus on this class, graduate, right? Get a good job, save some money, then we'll buy this house. Okay? Delayed gratification. Okay? If you have no control over the id, okay, if your super ego is not strong enough, right, then what happens? You try to fulfill this the desire of the id, right, and you try to fulfill it very quickly. So what do? Jadilah you sakau duit ke apa kan, okay, you get involved in corruption, you go rob a bank or something, right? Okay, for what? Because you want it quick, right? You can't wait a long time, right? You can't bother to go through the effort. You want to fulfill it quick, right? Tak boleh lah. You need a stronger superego. That's why superego is important. Education, faith, upbringing, moral values, and so on. Those things are important. Yeah, it stops you from being. It helps you to control your id better, right? So where does the superego come from? It comes from your knowledge, right? Your upbringing. Okay, and when we say knowledge, it's not just what you learn in class, right? It's what you learn from books. It's what you learn from talking to elders, right? It's what you it's what you learn from, say, watching watching TV, right? Moral values and so on. Okay, knowledge comes from all over the place. Okay, so all the boys in this class, okay, a moral value for you right there, right? Masa khutbah Jumaat tu, janganlah tidur. Okay, pay attention. All right, don't fall asleep during khutbah Jumaat. All right, it's all there. It builds your superego. It helps you constrain your your id. Okay. Anyway, that is the the unconscious mind. Okay. Do you have any questions on that particular topic before we move on to dreams? Okay, everyone's still here. Yeah, everyone's still here. Do you need a break? Do you need a break? Go get a drink or something, right? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So we're all good. Yeah. So we're gonna continue. Okay. Interpretation of dreams. Okay. So as mentioned just now, you cannot access this unconscious part of the brain, right? Of the mind. Sorry. You have the conscious part, which you are aware of, the pre-conscious, which you can be aware of if you think very hard. Okay. If you try very hard, okay, like memories and so on. But then the unconscious part, you cannot access, right? You cannot reach the unconscious part. However, there is a way. There is a way, I tell you, right? This is the way. Okay, Sigmund Freud says, okay, Sigmund Freud believes that dreams were the window into the unconscious mind. Okay, and that dreams could reveal hidden thoughts, hidden desires, and conflicts. Okay, the only way that you can access the unconscious mind is when you sleep and when you dream. Okay, so he developed a method of dream analysis. Okay, to explore the meaning of dreams, which he considered to be, as I quote here, royal road to the unconscious mind. Yeah. So how do you take a peek into the unconscious? You sleep and you dream. Okay. Now, a lot of the time, okay, if you dream, right? By the way, do you students, okay, do you dream when you sleep? Okay, if I recall correctly, masa zaman I student dulu, I don't dream anything. Okay, you barely get enough sleep, right? to dream. Okay, all right. So if you do dream, okay, dream about assignment, okay. Okay, you rasa, you've completed your assignment, but then suddenly you woke up. Oh, it's just a dream. Okay, you know. Okay, so right. The thing is, right, when you think about dreams, you dream about something, and then the dream, when you wake up in the morning, that dream is very fresh, right, in your memory. Okay, the dream is very fresh in your memory, but then after like a few minutes, okay, it starts to degrade, right? You start to forget. Okay, in half an hour, you've probably forgotten what you dreamt about already. Okay, so the psychiatrist, okay, would tell you to keep a dream journal beside your bed. Okay, a dream journal. So what they want you to do is they want you to sleep, right? And when you dream about something, you wake up in the morning. While that dream, the memory of that dream is still fresh in your head, you write about it in your dream journal. Okay, while you still remember, you write about it in your dream journal. Okay, later on, you bring your dream journal to your psychologist. Okay, you can talk about it, talk about what you dream. Okay, so when you talk about what you dream, okay, when you discuss about your dreams, okay, you go into these two things: manifest content and latent content. Okay, so there are two levels of dream that Freud proposed. The manifest content is the literal surface level content of the dream, okay, that you remember upon waking up. Imagine this: imagine you go to sleep and you dream about you dream about slaying a dragon and rescuing a princess. Okay, so what happens in your dream is you slay this dragon, you rescue the princess, and you ride a white elephant and fly across the sky and so on. Right? You wake up in the morning. Okay, you write in your dream journal. Right? In my dream, I slay this I slay this dragon. I rescue the princess, and then we fly across the sky on a white elephant. Okay, that is the manifest content. It is the surface level content. You bring this dream to your psychologist. Your psychologist would try to interpret this dream. What does this dream mean? Okay. He argued that the true meaning of dreams lies in the latent content. Okay, latent content meaning the subtext of that dream. Okay, it is hidden in symbolic and often unconscious material that the dream represents. Okay, so the psychologist will help you to figure out what this dragon means. Okay, what the princess means, what this white elephant means, and so on. Okay, in your dream. That is the latent content. Okay, so the dreams will relate a lot to symbolism and so on. Okay, so dreams and symbols. Freud believes that that dreams often contain symbols and imagery that represents hidden or repressed desires and conflicts. Okay, these symbols could be personal to the dreamer, or it could have universal meaning. Okay. For example, this is what what Freud suggests, right? Freud suggested that phallic symbols, okay, representing the penis, okay, and vaginal symbols representing female genitalia, right, often appears in dreams as representation of sexual desires. Okay, really, okay, I don't know. Okay, I have not, I personally have not been. I don't know about you guys. Okay, I personally have not been dreaming about penises, okay, or anything like that. All right, what do you dream about? Okay, I dream about being a space marine and so on, right? Uh, uh, when exactly do you dream about these kind of things? Okay, I don't know. All right, uh, maybe okay, some of these things are kind of uh, hard to think about. Okay, when you think properly about your dreams, right? I don't think I've ever come across a dream like this. All right, okay. Well, you dream about being fighting aliens, maybe, right? Dream about driving fast cars, being rich, and so on. Right? You dream about being happy. Okay. Uh, you know, don't remember any dicks in my dream. Okay. Okay. All right. But and then you dream about things, right? Nowadays is different, right? You dream about things. Where do you go? Okay. You don't really go to apa? You don't really go to psychoanalysis, right? But where do you go if you dream about strange things? Now we go to places like Darushifa and so on, right? Okay, and you're and Ustaz tayo ni kena rasuk ni kena santau ni, okay, things like that. All right, okay, all right. Let's let's look at this. All right, dream work. Okay, so the mind employs various mechanisms to transform and disguise latent content of dreams to make it more acceptable to the conscious mind. Okay, so why is it that dreams appear as symbols and so on, right? So this Freud suggests that this is because some things in the unconscious mind, your fears, your irrational, violent tendencies, or and so on, can be some real nightmare fuel. Okay, it can cause some. It doesn't want to traumatize you. Okay, every time you sleep and go into the unconscious. Okay, so what the mind does is it changes a lot of these things into symbols. Okay, so there are three processes that the mind uses. Okay, the first is condensation. Condensation means it combines several things into one image. Okay, into one symbol. All right, multiple thoughts, ideas, feelings are combined into a single symbol or image inside the dream. Okay, so for example, you say you slay a dragon, right, in your dream. Okay, you rescue a princess in your dream. So the dragon isn't just a dragon. The dragon could be all of the things that you fear, all of the things that are a threat to you, right? The dragon could be a combination of many things. The dragon could be your bully at school. The dragon could be the teacher that you are afraid of. The dragon could be an abusive parent that you might have, right? The dragon could be the government that takes away your tax, right? Your money. Okay, so it's all of these things combined into this one image, one symbol that is the dragon in your dream, right? Likewise, the princess that you save, right? It's not just your crush, right? The princess is not just a representation of your crush. It is several things, right? It could be your ex-girlfriend. It could be your concept of the ideal woman. Okay, the princess could be your mother. Okay, and so on. Right, everything condensed into a single image. All right, so your psychologist would try to figure this out. Right. Another thing is displacement. Displacement is emotions or desires that are shifted from one person or object into another within the dream. Okay, your love for this thing comes from your desire for something else. All right. Symbolization. The complex thoughts or emotions are represented symbolically in the dream. Okay. Okay, so what's the point of all this? Okay, you might want at this point. Okay, we're in the second theory. Okay, you might be wondering, what is this? What does this have to do with literature? Okay, are we still in literature class? Okay, or have I fallen asleep and I'm dreaming about psychology now? Okay, what's the relation of all this dream analysis with literature? Okay, so just as our dreams is a window to our unconscious, okay, literature is also seen as this process of displacement. Okay, literature, the writings of an author, right? The writings of a particular writer is also seen as a window into his unconscious mind. Okay, so when you read a work of literature from an author, okay, what happens in the story can also be analyzed as a window into the writer's unconscious mind. Okay, his fear, his experience in life, his trauma, all comes out onto the pages of the story that this author has written. Okay, so that's how you use interpretation of dreams in the prospect of literary studies. Okay, all right. Any questions before we move on to the last last theory here, to the last concept? Are you okay with interpretation of dream? Paham ke semua? You understand? Okay. All right. It's getting a bit cuckoo. Okay, but I'm telling you that's the most abstract part of it. Okay, now we come to defense mechanism. Its defense mechanism is actually much easier to understand. It is something that we can actually see done in real life. It is something that sometimes maybe we do in real life. Okay, defense mechanism. Let's talk about this. So defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological strategies that individuals use to cope with anxiety, with conflicts, and with uncomfortable emotions. Okay, so these mechanisms operate without conscious awareness, and they serve to protect the ego from the distressing thoughts or feelings that arise from conflicts between the id and the superego. Okay, so a defense mechanism does that. Okay, it is a strategy that you use in order to cope with the id. Okay, in order to control the id. Okay, and the superego. All right. So these are Freud suggests Freud proposes 10 different defense mechanisms. I'm not going to talk about all 10. All right. Otherwise, this class will not finish in time. All right. So I'm going to talk about 4 of these defense mechanisms that is most common. All right. So these are displacement, repression, sublimation, and regression. Okay, so 4 of them. Let's look at these 4 defense mechanisms. All right. So the first one is displacement. Okay, displacement involves redirecting one's emotions, okay, especially negative ones, from their original source to a substitute target that is less threatening. Okay, so for instance, an individual who is angry with their boss might go home and take out their frustrations on family members. All right. Okay, so think about this example. All right. You you get into a conflict with your boss at the office. Okay, so your boss marah you, right? You did some, maybe you did something wrong. Maybe the boss is just a jerk, right? The boss degrades you, right? The boss starts to maki hamun semua tu kan, okay? And how do you feel at that moment? Okay, bila kena maki, right? How do you feel when you get insulted, degraded, and so on? Okay, how do you think you feel? Hey, come on, guys. Are you all here? Humiliated, right? You feel humiliated. You rasa apa lagi? You rasa geram, right? You feel angry, right? Benci, ashamed, right? All of this negative feeling. What do you feel like doing? What do you feel like doing? Feel like, yes, like you want to kill him, right? You want to kill your boss, right? You want to just punch him right there in the face, right? Beat him up. Oh, that'd be good, right? Right? Why do you feel that way? It is your id, right? Your id wants instant gratification. Your id says, apa geramnya kau ni, right? Let's just punch him. Let's just punch him right now, all right? But your super ego tells you, no, you kena bersabar, okay, calm down, right? Oh, restrain yourself, okay? You cannot punch your boss, otherwise you're going to lose your job, right? If you punch your boss, okay? You'll go to jail if you punch your boss, okay? So you can't start a fight in the office, okay? You'll never get a job again if you resort to violence, okay? Okay. So your super ego is telling you that, right? So what do you have to do? What does your ego have to do? You just have to sabar, senyum je. Tapi that perasaan geram tu still ada, right? So what do you do? What do? You sabar, right? You you be patient, semua tu kan, alright? And then what do? You go home, you beat your wife, right? You go home, you beat your kids, okay? Again, you become very snappy and so on, right? Go again. Okay, your kid throws a little tantrum, you beat you belt them right there, pop, 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 right? Why do you do that? It is displacement, right? When you are angry with your boss, but you do not, you don't act out on that emotion. That you suppress that emotion, you repress the emotion, it doesn't go away. That feeling of anger, of geram semua tu is still there when you are driving home. Okay, when you're driving home, it's still there. You're thinking about it, right? Your boss is living rent-free in your head, as they say, right? Okay, you're still geram, right? You get home, you beat your kids. You become, you take it out on your family, right? Why do you beat your kids? Because your kids aren't going to fire you, right? They have to live with you or whatever, right? Okay, they are less threatening, right? Your kids aren't going to turn around and beat your ass, right? No, so that is displacement. Okay, that's a displacement. You redirect your emotion onto something else. Okay, onto something else. So that's displacement. I'll tell you what. I tell you what I like. Okay, do you know what a rage room is? Okay, have you ever heard of a rage room? What is a rage room? What do you do? Joy, tell me. Tell me what a rage room is. Right, okay, you can musnahkan benda, right? Rage room is great, right? I tell you what, you Gen Zs are very creative, yeah. Okay, you take this concept of displacement, okay, and you turn it into a business. You monetize it, right? If you're angry with your boss, you go to a rage room and you beat up things in the rage room, right? You pecahkan TV, okay, right, okay. You pecahkan TV at the rage room, okay? Well, does Adik pecahkan TV at his home? Do you live in a rage room? Okay, don't turn your home into a rage room, right? So you go to a rage room, you pay money, kan? And you go pecahkan all these things, right? You pecahkan the perabot, you pecahkan the furniture, you pecahkan all this glass bottle and so on, right? You act out on this destructive tendency. Okay, I tell you, it is cheaper, it is better than beating your kids. Okay, so you redirect all of that anger to other things. Yes, Umi, you have a question? Oh, okay, press the button. Okay, all right. So that's the final takeaway from this from displacement, right? Okay, you get angry with your boss, go find a rage room. Okay, don't beat your kids. Okay, don't beat your wife. All right, come on, people. All right, displace your emotion in a more acceptable way, yeah, in a socially acceptable way, yeah. All right, don't beat your kids, don't traumatize your kids with that, right? Okay. Right, so that's displacement, all right, okay. And rage rooms, very good idea, right? Anyone been to a rage room? How much do they cost? Are there some there are in KL, right? I've heard of it. I've seen the ads, right? I don't know why IG is blasting the ads at me. Okay, based on the things that you choose to destroy. Oh, okay, all right. So based on this category, you pay more money for more expensive things to destroy. Oh, okay, all right. Interesting to know. Interesting to know. Okay, they cost about the same as an escape room, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Maybe, right? Although it's not reusable. Yeah. Rich room. Okay. Okay. Anyway. Let's continue. Okay. Next thing here is repression. Okay. Repression involves pushing unacceptable thoughts, feelings, and memories out of the conscious awareness and into the unconscious mind. Right superbite can also reduce our anger. Okay, very interesting. There's another thing there. Okay, there's another thing also related to displacing anger. Yeah, I suppose. Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Okay, in the next one. Okay, so repression. Let's talk about repression first. Repression is bottling up. Right. This concept of bottling up your emotions and so on. Right. You bottle up your anger. Right. You bottle up your issues. Okay. Put a cap in it. Right. Okay. You bottle up your issues. That is repression. Okay. So you push down, okay, unacceptable thoughts or feelings down into the unconscious. Okay, by repressing the disturbing elements, individuals can avoid confronting them directly. Okay, so apa, you the thing is, right, when you bottle up these issues, or you push it down into the unconscious, they don't disappear, they are still there. Okay, so for example, someone who experienced significant childhood trauma, okay, as they might bottle up that trauma, okay, and then as they grow up, they might notice that parts of their childhood memory are missing. There are things that they can't remember, okay, about the childhood memory. Okay, if you have a traumatic childhood, right? Why? Because all of that trauma, you choose to push it into the unconscious mind. Okay, you don't address the issue, so you choose to forget it. instead. But it's still there. If it's bottled up in your unconscious, it can still influence your behavior, your feelings, and so on, right? Who does a lot of repression? Yeah, who does a lot of repression? Men does a lot of repression. Yeah, okay. You go through, you go through a fight, okay, with your spouse, with your girlfriend, whatsoever, right? What do? You bottle it up, right? You bottle it up. You don't talk about it, right? You say, apa, what do you say, right? Perempuan tak pernah salah, right? Okay, you bottle it up, right? You sulk, you throw a tantrum, right? Okay, you don't address the issue, right? You bottle it up, you forget it, yeah. Simpan, you become more bitter, right? Okay, what is that? That is repression. Okay, that's repression. You think that when you bottle things up, they disappear. They don't. Okay, or eldest, not just eldest daughter, eldest child in general. Okay, can end up bottling things up, right? Repression can lead to, yes, that's right. Okay, it can lead to infidelity and so on, because but they tend to express their emotions towards other people. Yes, that's right. What is that called? That is displacement as well. Okay, you channel your emotions elsewhere, right? You're not supposed to do that, kan? Boy, ya, manly, ya. Tiba-tiba, okay? Right, okay, so repression, okay? That's another thing, bottling things up, not that good, right? Not that good. Okay, if you have this tendency to repress things, okay, I suggest you go to a rage room. Okay, go to a rage room, beat up some TVs. Okay, I suppose that helps. Okay, all right. Let's talk about this. Sublimation. The next one. Next defense mechanism is sublimation. Sublimation is a more positive defense mechanism, right? Sublimation is one of the more adaptive defense mechanism. It involves channeling unacceptable impulses and energies into socially acceptable or productive outlets. Okay, so instead of it's not entirely like displacement. Displacement means that you have that emotion, you channel it elsewhere, right? Like, for example, you feel angry about your boss, right? You channel that anger to your kids, right? your kids, right? That is displacement. Or you go to a rage room, you channel that anger against, to the things in the rage room, right? You break things and so on, right? That is displacement. It is the same emotion. If anger, you turn that anger elsewhere, right? That is displacement. Sublimation is different. Sublimation is where you take those impulses, those energy, and you channel that same energy into something else, something more productive. And it does not have to be the same type of emotion. Okay, you have, again, guys, okay, for example, okay, when they go through a breakup, right? You clash with your girlfriend, right? You break up with your girlfriend, or ataupun you confess to your crush, right? And your crush say, I just want to be friends, right? You can reject, right? What do? What do guys do when they have this heartbreak, right? You go to the gym, right? People suggest, okay, you go to the gym and you work out, right? Why do you work out? Because that is, the process of working out at the gym, right? Uses up all of this energy. Okay, that's one example. Okay, but other than that, the creative efforts are also a way of sublimation. So, for example, you have a lot of trauma in your life, okay, then you become a writer. You write stories, right? And through that story, through writing, you are channeling all of that negative energy, all of that trauma in your life into your creative work. You become a painter. You paint. You paint pictures, you paint portraits, and so on, right? So you are rechanneling all of this energy, these impulses, into something that is productive. Okay. So try to channel your energy into doing your assignments and so on. Okay. So that is sublimation. All right. So on what Joy mentioned just now, okay, riding, you ride superbike, right, to reduce your anger, right? That is that falls under sublimation, okay, because anger does not transfer into riding motorbike, right? In fact, you shouldn't be riding, angry, right? If you ride angry, what happens? You go and punch people's side mirrors again, okay? We don't want that, no. But if you ride motorbike, you go up to the mountains or something, right? You ride up Cameron Highlands and stuff. What are you doing? You are channeling that anger into something else, right? You're channeling that anger into focus, right? Into the skill, right? Yeah, into the attention that you're paying on the road, right? Right, when you ride the bike, right? Okay, it's a different concept than displacement. Okay, because displacement means that you are channeling the same energy. Okay, so you ride a motorbike while very angry, not a very good thing, right? You're gonna hurt people. Okay, but it's more sublimation what you're talking about. Okay, you ride motorbike or you go on vacation, right, to what we call release stress, right? That is sublimation. Okay, because you are changing that energy already. Okay, all right, so the last defense mechanism is called regression. Okay, regression means that you are reverting to an earlier stage of cognitive development. Okay, regression occurs when the individual reverts to an earlier stage of a child that is more childlike. Okay, in the stages of development. Okay, you do this to cope with stress or anxiety. Right, it can manifest as behaviors or responses that were characteristics of an earlier age. So, for example, if you go through a lot of stress and anxiety, what do? You cry, you start crying, right? So crying is called regression. Okay, we are reverting back to a more childlike stage. Crying, throwing a tantrum. Okay, your age, you're 45 years old, you throw a tantrum, right? You start cry, right? You start tearing down all your books and so on, right? That's a regression. Okay, sucking your thumb. Okay, what else? Some people have the tendency to bite fingernails, right? When they're nervous, right? That is a regression. Okay. So those are the defense mechanisms. Okay, it is how your brain, your ego, cope with stress, with not fulfilling the id. Okay, and so on. All right. Application to literary criticism. Okay, so psychoanalytic critics examine characters' behaviors, their thoughts, their emotions, okay, to uncover the unconscious motivations and symbols, and conflicts. Sorry, okay, motivations and conflicts. Symbols and images in literature are interpreted as representations of deeper unconscious desires and fears. Okay, dreams and fantasies in literature are examined for their symbolic significance. So a lot of the time, when you are psychoanalyzing literature, it is also, you're not just psychoanalyzing the characters in the story. A lot of the time, you are also psychoanalyzing the writer as well. Okay, because the novel, the story, right, that work of literature is seen as a sublimation. Yeah, it's seen as a sublimation for the author. The author has some of this trauma, this anger, this unresolved issues, and so on. And the author channel all of that into writing, right, into their work of literature. So by reading and interpreting that work of literature, we get to judge the author as well. Okay. Psychoanalytic criticism uncovers repressed material in the text, thoughts, desires, and emotions that are hidden beneath the surface. Literature often explores traumatic experiences. Psychoanalytic critics often examines how characters cope with trauma and whether the narrative provides catharsis. Okay, a form of catharsis. What is catharsis? Okay, catharsis is another interesting concept, right? Catharsis is this channeling of our own, not really channeling, more like a projection of our own unresolved issues, okay, through the media that we consume, through the film that we watch, or through the novels that we read, the stories that we hear, and so on. Think about this, right? If you watch a movie, for example, you watch a movie that is very sad, right? You watch a movie that is very sad, what happens? You start crying, right? So that is a catharsis, okay? It causes you to cry, right? So by watching this movie, by engaging with this movie, right, and by feeling sad, by crying, what we are doing is also we are purging our own repressed issues, okay? So, but we don't have to go through that experience, okay, in our real life, but by engaging with the film, we are going through a similar therapeutic process, right? The process they call catharsis, right? That's why kadang-kadang tu you watch a good action movie, kan? You watch John Wick cover, kan? And then you get to you see all the fight scenes and you rasa macam oh geram, okay, right? You feel very engaged in the action, right? That is a form of catharsis as well. Okay, we can't do that in real life, right? Can't go out and fight 10 guys and beat them up in real life. No, we will end up in the hospital, right? Okay, we can't do that in real life. So we watch movies and we get that same feeling, but we satisfy the id, okay, the drive of the id, the desire of the id, through a media instead. Okay, this is one reason why playing video games is actually quite therapeutic as well. Okay, all right. You feel like you want to punch your boss at the office, right? But you can't punch your boss at the office; you'll go to jail. So you go home, right? You go home, you turn on your computer, and you start Doom Eternal, and you play Doom Eternal. You start beating demons and so on, right? That is catharsis. That feels good. It certainly feels better than beating your wife. Okay, I tell you that. All right, it's catharsis. Do that instead of beating your kids. Okay, play video games instead of beating your kids. Okay, get catharsis that way. Okay, or go to a rage room. Right. Okay, conclusion. Okay. Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical theory enriches our understanding of complex characters, intricate plot dynamics, and the depths of human psyche within literary works. Okay, his exploration of the unconscious mind, repression, and the influence of early experiences has illuminated the motivations and hidden desires of characters, providing writers with a deep understanding of human behavior and inner conflict. Okay, and that is psychoanalytic literature. That is Sigmund Freud's theory. Okay, do you have any questions, class? Any questions? Do you have any questions? Anything to ask? Anything at all? No questions. That's okay. All right then. That will be it for today.